my name is Casey Vega, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I will be teaching you about intermittent fasting. Now, before we dig into intermittent fasting, we have to understand all the components and if your goal is weight loss. The number one thing that we should focus on, and is the number one thing that most of our clients forget about, is stress, and how stress specifically will hinder your weight loss if you don't focus on it. The second thing is sleep. And today, specifically on this presentation, we'll touch on both how stress and sleep hinder your weight loss. They overall need a presentation on their own, and it is why we're teaching you step by step on how to improve those. The third thing is water intake, and I'm sure you've already heard your trainers talk to you about how to improve that. The fourth is nutrition. And today we'll talk about specifically balancing your eating and fasting windows and what to eat when you are eating. And the last thing is exercise. Now, before we dig into intermittent fasting, we have to look at what happens to your body when we eat. When you consume a meal, your blood sugar rises. In response to the spike of blood sugar, your body releases insulin, which allows your cells to absorb that blood sugar in your system. Now, that glucose is converted into glycogen within your liver. Your liver has a limited amount of space to be able to store that sugar within your system. So once it is saturated, your body will start converting that sugar into fat. That process is called nouveau lipogenesis, literally meaning making fat of new. Now, as you already know, our body releases insulin when there's a spike of blood sugar in your system. Now, most of us believe that eating less and moving more will help you lose more weight, right? The less calories that you eat, the smaller that you are, the more calories that you eat, the bigger that you become. Unfortunately, this is not true. Our bodies work in a different manner. We respond to different macronutrients. In order of the blood sugar spike, and insulin spike in your system, the biggest one are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates spike your blood sugar, therefore they spike your insulin to allow your body to store that fuel. The second is protein. Now, protein can't be readily stored in your system. It is broken down into amino acids. Any excess amino acids, and it is also converted into sugar, which is stored into your liver or converted into fat. And the last one is fat. Now, fat is broken down into fatty acids and is readily absorbed into your system, and is where the belief that fat makes you fat came from. And it is not true. We have to always remember the insulin spike within your system. Keep that in mind throughout our presentation. Now, one of the best examples of eating less, moving more is The Biggest Loser. And I'm sure almost everybody has watched this show. And I also want to ask, have you ever seen a Biggest Loser reunion? And in all the presentations that I've done, the answer has always been no. And the reason behind it is because most of the participants gain all of the weight or even more weight after they leave. And the reason that happens is because there's a metabolic adaptation that was caused within their system. So when participants went to The Biggest Loser, and let's say my body, for example, was burning 2,000 calories before the show, then I was put into this program of eating less calories, moving more and burning more. And after a period of time, my body sensed a starvation mode. And you've all heard of this concept before. Now, your body, in order to protect itself, now burns between 35 to 40% less calories to maintain its muscle mass in its system. And so, after a few months, my body now burns 1,500 calories, just using good round numbers. But then I leave the show. Now I'm no longer being weighed in every week. I'm not being fed specific meals, nor am I training the way that I used to. And yet my body does not recognize that. That adaptation stayed with some of these participants even 6 years after. And so now my body burning 1,500 calories, going back to the same thing that I was doing, I am now gaining weight consistently regardless of the shift in my activity level and food intake, which is alarming, but it's very interesting as we move on to intermittent fasting. All right, so if it's not calories that is making us fat, then what is it? And the answer is insulin. right? Insulin, as we already talked about, regulates your energy within your system. If there's no food, there's very low insulin. Now, when there is very low insulin, your body already knows that it can release blood sugar in your system if it needs it. Now, when there is insufficient amount of insulin within your system, then your body starts to waste away. And this is where type 1 diabetics, this is what type 1 diabetics deal with. Now, I'm a very visual person, and so I want you to keep the image of a refrigerator, and the refrigerator will represent your liver, and an outside freezer that you can keep in your garage, and imagine that is your body fat. Now, when you go grocery shopping, most of your groceries go into the refrigerator. Any excess items, especially protein that won't be used within a day or two, it is put into the freezer for later use. When you need to eat some lunch, you go to your fridge and you put some of those items out, you make yourself a meal, and then you go on about your day. Once the refrigerator is depleted, then you go back to the grocery store and you refill it. This is the same thing that is happening within your body throughout the day when you're eating. So when you wake up in the morning and you break your fast, because breakfast is when you are breaking your fast after sleeping for 8 hours, then some of that glycogen within your liver has been depleted, but then you eat breakfast and you replenish the glycogen within your liver. And if you eat excess amount of food, then your body will convert that excess into fat. And this is happening throughout the day. So what we need to do is be able to tap into the body fat, and this is where fasting comes into play. Now, if we say that insulin causes weight gain and therefore obesity, then we need to look at studies that show that. Fortunately for us, there has been hundreds of studies that have been done on patients with diabetes. Any doctor or patient who has ever been prescribed insulin knows that the more insulin that they're given, the more weight that they will gain. And a lot of these studies specifically look at the more that you give them, the more weight that they'll gain. And the opposite is true. The removal of insulin, the weight also comes off. All right, now let's talk about stress specifically. You already know that we all have a system called the fight or flight system, right? It is there to protect us in case of danger. Now, if a bear was to walk into the room right now, my fight or flight system will be activated. Cortisol will be released. When cortisol is released, my body responds with releasing blood sugar in my system. Why do we release the blood sugar? Because if I'm going to either fight or flee from this bear, my muscles are going to need fuel to be able to do either or. Now, fortunately for us, we do not encounter bears all day, every day. What we do encounter are psychological stressors. You wake up in the morning, you turn on the TV, and you watch all the horrible things that are happening around you. You get in your car, you're stuck in traffic, your fight or flight is released. It's activated. You go to work, your boss makes you mad, and you're constantly being activated. The cortisol is constantly being activated throughout your system. Now, if cortisol is high, then we already know blood sugar is high, because your body is going to respond to this fight or flight, that fight or flight response, whether it's a bear or whether it is your boss making you angry. So if blood sugar is high, then your body is going to respond by releasing insulin. And if your insulin is high, then your body is in a constant fat storage process all day, every day, on top of you eating consistently throughout the day. So this is why stress is the number one thing that we need to focus on to be able to manage it throughout our day. Now, if we're saying that cortisol causes weight gain, then the removal of cortisol should do the opposite and cause weight loss. And that is specifically what we see in Addison's disease, where your adrenal gland is damaged. The damage to that adrenal gland plummets the cortisol levels within your system. 97% of patients with Addison's disease exhibit weight loss. Now, sleep. Sleep is a very potent psychological stressor if you do not get enough of it. One night of sleep deprivation increases your cortisol over 100%. There's studies that found that one night of sleep deprivation can cause you to be as insulin resistant as type 2 diabetics, which is extremely alarming. Now, let's think about it. Let's step back for a second and think about it. If one night of sleep deprivation causes 100% of cortisol spike, then you already know your body's going to release blood sugar within your system because your fight or flight is activated. High blood sugar, your body will respond by releasing insulin to be able to absorb that blood sugar. Again, causing your body to be in a fat storage state. Now, the turning point to as far as how much sleep you should get, 7.5 hours is the golden amount of time that you should be sleeping. And the last missing piece in regards to weight gain and obesity overall is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is what type 2 diabetics deal with, where their bodies either don't produce enough insulin or their cells aren't sensitive enough to be able to absorb that insulin or allow your body to absorb the blood sugar. Now, what happens here is that your body is constantly being flooded with insulin, and our bodies are extremely smart. If there is too much of something within your system, then your body becomes resistant to it. Similar to alcoholics, adults who have been drinking for most of their life, they slowly but surely start to drink more to be able to have the same effect that they used to when they were younger. The same thing happens within our body. If your body does not respond the same way that it used to with the same amount of insulin, then your body is going to release even more insulin, causing a self-reinforcing cycle, keeping you in a fat storage state consistently. Over time, if that is not treated, then you will become a type 2 diabetic. So what is the answer? We have to break the cycle, and the way for us to be able to break that cycle is through intermittent fasting. Now, we can't just change what we eat, because what we eat is extremely important, right? We already talked about carbohydrates being the #1 thing that causes the biggest spike of blood sugar. So removing those items from your diet will be very important. Now, carbohydrates that I'm talking about are simple carbs like pasta, rice, breads, cereals, but also we have to create reoccurring cycles of very low insulin. Now, because all foods cause an insulin response, then we need to make sure that we have no food to make sure our insulin is low. Regular fasting periods have been proving to improve your insulin sensitivity, therefore being the key to our weight loss. Now, what exactly is intermittent fasting? Intermittent fasting is a voluntary withholding of food for either religious or health reasons. Now, your body can exist in one or two states: a fed, high insulin, energy storing state, or a fasted state, low insulin, fat, or energy burning state. Now, the process of using and burning the storage of fuel within your system is reversed when we eat. So when we eat, we replenish the glycogen in your system and then store fat in your body. With fasting, your body will deplete the glycogen in your liver, and that glycogen, depending on your activity level, can last between 24 to 48 hours, and then your body will tap into the body fat within your system. Now, the missing piece, and the coolest thing I think about intermittent fasting, is that because your body is tapping into the fuel that is in your body, and specifically your fat storage, your body does not cause the metabolic adaptation that we saw in The Biggest Loser. Now, just a few benefits from fasting. Fasting can improve your insulin sensitivity. It increases adrenaline, allowing you to have a more intense workout. It boosts your metabolism. It decreases inflammation. It improves mental clarity. It improves your immune system. It is anti-aging. It also lowers your blood sugar. It increases energy. It is fat burning, lowers cholesterol. It could potentially reduce the likelihood of you having Alzheimer's. It improves the release of HGH, human growth hormone, throughout the day. It actually activates autophagy, and I'll dig into that in just a second. And for those individuals who like extended fasting, and I don't recommend you go into extended fasting when you first start, but has been found that it can improve stem cell activity within your system. Now, let's talk about HGH, human growth hormone. Human growth hormone promotes stronger muscles and bones. It actually promotes the growth of both. It enhances weight loss. Whenever HGH is present in your system, it allows your body to tap into your body fat to release it for fuel. And one interesting fact is that when you consume at least 3 meals in a day, the HGH that is naturally produced by your system, it is suppressed to 0. Overeating can further decrease that by another 80%. Now, another interesting fact, HGH that is not naturally produced by your system can actually cause cardiovascular issues and prostate cancer in males. Another great benefit about fasting is cellular autophagy. Now, autophagy means that it is the breakdown of old damaged cells, and the energy produced by those old damaged cells can be used to create new ones. And this is where the anti-aging component and Alzheimer's prevention comes into play. One thing that you have to remember though is that autophagy does not kick in until about hour 16 of your fast. Now, the number one concern that most of our clients, and I'm sure you have too, is how hungry you will be if you are fasting. Now, one thing that we have to remember is that hunger is a learned response. And if you've ever heard of Pavlov's dogs, we're very much similar to them. So for me specifically, if I smell and I hear a sizzling steak, my mouth will start to water and my body will start creating the response of hunger in the anticipation for food. The same thing happens if you wake up at the same time every day and you eat breakfast at the same time every day. Your body anticipates that you will consume food and it'll start to get hungry before that time. And so what we need to do is to defeat that hunger conditioning by changing the patterns of eating. So if you eat breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning every day, then what you should do when you're first starting to fast is just skip breakfast and maybe eat it an hour or two later. And that is the way that your body will slowly but surely start getting accustomed to you not eating breakfast on that specific time every day. And the last thing that we have to remember is that hunger comes in waves. After your last meal, about 4 hours later, you will get hit with your first hunger pain. What you have to understand is that hunger will come and go. It's not gonna come and stay and get worse as time progresses. Having a cup of tea or coffee will help you, and by the time you're done with that cup of tea or coffee, the hunger should have subsided. Now, what can you consume while you are fasting? The number one thing that you should be consuming is water. Now, I highly recommend you add at least a half of a teaspoon of good quality sea salt to your water. It'll help you stay hydrated. The second thing you consume is actually sparkling water. So it's just like regular water, but actually sparkling water, in a recent study that was done on individuals who were fasting, when they did consume sparkling water, there were electrical currents that were activated within their stomach that made them feel like they were full or satisfied. It didn't happen with regular water. Now, one thing that you have to remember about sparkling water, it can't be flavored because your body does not know the difference between something sweet and sweet-like and will respond in the same way as if it was consuming sugar. So sparkling water, non-flavored. Coffee is something that you can absolutely consume, and please make sure you don't add any sugar or sweetener to your coffee. And you have to remember, caffeine is actually a natural hunger suppressant, so it can actually help you while you're fasting. All kinds of teas are also good for you to consume. A lot of people ask me about black tea and green tea. All teas are good. And lastly, especially if you are completing extended fast, bone broth is a good option to have because of the minerals and sodium that it contains. Now, let's dig in a little bit deeper in regards to artificial flavors and sweeteners. Now, our bodies don't know the difference between something that's artificial and something that it's real. What it does register is that it's something sweet or sweet-like, touches your palate, and your body will respond in the same way as if it was having the real thing. The only difference is that it does not have the calories that something with real sugar would have, and it actually causes cravings to be able to fill in those calories that you did not consume. Now, let's go into a few basic rules of nutrition. And these are things that you have heard in the past, but I have to reiterate them, especially when your eating window is open. Number one is to eat whole, unprocessed foods. So if you had a mom and if it grew from the ground, then you can consume it. When you go to the grocery store, staying on the outside aisles, on the outside perimeter of the grocery store is where you should be purchasing your groceries. The biggest thing, avoid sugar, right? We already talked about how your body replenishes the glycogen in your liver without allowing your body to tap into your fat storage. So sugar is off limits, and so are refined grains, right? All of the cereals, rice, pastas, breads, sweets, you name it, you shouldn't consume it. And lastly, eat a diet high in natural fats. Things like olive oil, good quality olive oil, avocado, nuts, you name it. Now, let's talk about a few myths that you will absolutely hear from other people if you tell them that you're fasting. The number one thing that most individuals will mention is that your body will go into starvation mode. And alongside of that your body will start burning muscle for fuel. Neither of those things will happen, because when you're fasting, your body releases HGH, which actually protects your muscle from being depleted, and it promotes muscle growth. The second thing that it actually does is releases adrenaline, and actually adrenaline makes your metabolism speed up. And the last thing to remember is that our bodies will not tap into your muscle for fuel until, in males, you're in 4% body fat, and females, 8% body fat. And thankfully, we're good in that area. Most of us have significantly more body fat than that. Another thing that individuals will tell you is that your body will go into a very low blood sugar. And as we already mentioned before, your body already has mechanisms in place to keep that from happening. If your blood sugar drops, your body will break down glycogen within your liver and release it into your system as blood sugar. The next thing that most people will tell you is that it will cause overeating, and it can. But if you look at the big scheme of things, and let's say when you're starting, you skip breakfast and you go into lunch and dinner, you already eliminated that amount of calories in the morning. Now, you have to be very conscious, and it doesn't mean that whenever you open your eating window, you're gonna have breakfast, lunch, and dinner in that eating window, per se. The next thing that most individuals will tell you is that our bodies will be depleted from nutrients. Now, thankfully, you will have enough time before and after your fast to eat a nutrient-rich diet to keep that from happening. I highly recommend taking a multivitamin in your eating window. And actually, the longest fast ever recorded was a guy who did it for 392 days, and he supplemented with a multivitamin every day. So you're good. Just don't go that far. And the last thing that most individuals will tell you that it's just crazy. They can't fathom them going more than a few hours without eating. So the last two questions that you have to ask yourself is, number one, is it healthy? The answer is yes. And can you do it? And the answer is absolutely no. How can you get started? Super simple, right? Just skipping breakfast is one of the easiest ways to do it, especially because most of us are busy during the day. So cutting off your last meal at 8 p.m. and not eating anything after that, and breaking your fast until 10 a.m. the next morning. So if you eat at 7 or 8, that's 2 to 3 hours that you're delaying your breakfast. Super easy. A lot of clients wanted me to explain them specifically what I was eating in my eating window. So when I first started, 14-10 was the easiest thing to implement. So breakfast, I'm a big person that loves salads at any time of the day. So a steak salad with avocado, balsamic vinaigrette, and some bacon is amazing for me. Something between that breakfast or my last meal will be a handful of nuts, like almonds, for example. And for dinner, some salmon and asparagus sounds really good. Now, once you have been doing that for a week or two and your body has become accustomed to not eating breakfast at the same time, then you can extend your fasting window and go into a 16-8, meaning 16 hours fasting, 8 hours of eating. So again, 8 p.m. will be your cutoff, and then you won't eat again until 12 p.m. the next day. So you will go straight into lunch. And so one of my favorite things to have is actually baked sweet potato with baked chicken thighs that are chopped up, and roasted broccoli with bacon and drizzled with ranch. It's amazing. Something to have for a snack before dinner. It's a cup of bone broth. And lastly, for dinner, some chicken stir fry. Now, there are those individuals who should definitely not fast. Anyone who is severely malnourished and underweight should not fast. Children under the age of 18 should not fast. Women who are pregnant, want to become pregnant, or are currently nursing also shouldn't fast. And anyone who suffers from an eating disorder. While fasting will not cost one, someone who does have an eating disorder, fasting can exacerbate that issue. Now, individuals who should be cautious and definitely consult their doctors should be those individuals who have gout, are taking medications. Easiest thing with meds is that if you have to take a medication with food, just make your eating window line up with when you have to take your meds. Individuals with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, anyone with gastroesophageal reflux syndrome, and lastly, women who had just started their menopausal symptoms. And the reason behind it is because there's so many hormones that are changing within your system that you don't want to yet change another hormone, which insulin is one. But if you have been in that menopausal state for a while, then you can attempt fasting for sure. A few tips in regards to fasting: drink water, plenty of water, and add some good quality salt to it. Do your fasting while you're busy. So for me specifically, I'm a working mom of 2 boys, and so fasting from lunch until dinner works for me, Monday through Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, I switch my fasting window to evening because our family loves to have one of those big breakfasts every Saturday and Sunday, and so I shift my fasting to the afternoon. Drinking green tea and coffee is extremely helpful because it does suppress your hunger. Remember to ride the hunger waves, and when you are hungry, drink some sparkling water. It does help. Don't tell everyone you're fasting. Definitely tell your trainer and doctor if you are, so we can coach you through it. Give yourself at least a month of fasting to see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, you can toss it and continue to eat a healthy and nutritious diet. Again, follow a nutritious diet on your days off and while you are eating. Don't binge eat. And lastly, fit fasting into your life. If you have a big event coming up and it doesn't line up with your fasting or eating window, just enjoy the moment and continue your fast the following day. Now, a few resources that I highly recommend you dig into before you start fasting are several books. Number 1, The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. Now, if you love science and you love studies and you want to see it all through that lens, that is the book for you. The Complete Guide to Fasting, also by Dr. Jason Fung, is a complementation of both personal stories and the science behind fasting. Stop Eat by Brad Pillen is another great resource. Delay Don't Deny is another great resource from the perspective of an individual who has been fasting for a few years. And there's a couple of podcasts that really help me understand fasting and their benefits. And the last tool that I will give you is an application. It's called Zero. Now, this is only for Apple users, sorry everyone else, but it is a great tool because it's free. 2, it lists all the different fasts that you can do. When you click on it, it'll show you the benefits and it'll track your fasting and eating window, and also it'll create a schedule of your previous fasts. And that is it. If you have any questions or concerns, please consult to your trainer or facility manager in the studio, or you can reach out to me personally and I'll be able to help you. Thank you so much.